Exposed, 7 sinister secrets, lurking beneath the haunted depths of the ocean revealed. As the waves crashed violently against the rocky shore of Seabrook, Maine, the whispers of the ocean grew louder. They carried tales of disappearance and dread. Mark Harris, a weary father, trudged home after another grueling night at the fishery. The locals praised Seabrook's charm, but every crash of a wave felt like a chill creeping down his spine. On the surface, their life appeared perfect, sunny days filled with laughter and sandy beaches, but beneath the water's surface, something sinister lurked. Jake, their innocent 6-year-old, often sat by the edge of the water, sketching bizarre shapes that twisted the heart and twisted the mind. "Look, Daddy!" he would shout, his voice a mixture of excitement and terror. "I see them!" Dark silhouettes danced under the waves. Mark would smile and chalk it up to imaginary play. Kids had wild imaginations, right? But Lisa couldn't shake that nagging feeling. Something was off. Rumors floated among the townspeople like drifting buoys, bobbing on the surface of disbelief. Fishermen had vanished without a trace, swallowed whole by the sea, as if they never existed. The sky flickered ominously at night, a warning? Mark dismissed the stories as misguided folklore, but Lisa clung to every whispered caution. One afternoon, while helping Emily dust the attic, she caught a mention of the town's eerie past, a secret history drenched in shipwrecks and dark agreements that manipulated lives for profit. "Mom, look at this!" Emily exclaimed, dusting off an old maritime-themed book. She scattered the shimmering dust across the floor. Something clinked and clattered under a loose floorboard. A diary! As she flipped through the pages, a cold wind swept through the room, whispering a chilling truth. The words detailed people who vanished long ago, their fates intertwined with that of the sea. Lisa felt her heart race. What was happening to their town? Before they could process the unveiling horror, darkness enveloped Seabrook. The fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, like a predator stalking its prey. Shadows beneath the water twisted and morphed, and whispers grew louder. Jake refused to go near the shoreline, his wide eyes betraying his fear, trembling at the thought of what lurked just below the surface. Late one night, Mark sensed something was amiss, the air heavy with dread, urging him to investigate the fishery. He felt an inexplicable pull toward their neighbor, Tom, who often spoke with an unsettling familiarity about the town's history. Was he hiding something? Just as doubt consumed him, a fierce thunderstorm erupted, sending tumultuous waves crashing against the docks. After hearing reports of strange lights blinking at sea, Mark raced into the tempest. Water lashed at him like angry fists, but he pressed on. Reflections shimmered on the surface, forming outlines that took his breath away, beautiful yet horrifying. It struck him. The whispers Jake heard weren't just figments, they were real. The ocean was calling, demanding an unholy offering. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mark stumbled home, drenched and shaken, but the revelation nestled deep within his chest was worse than the storm. Lisa gripped the diary, dread tightening around her throat. She knew then, they had to confront the truth about Seabrook before the shadows crept farther into their lives. Who could they trust when the whispers of the ocean pulled them closer to the brink of darkness? And as the storm raged on, the question loomed. Larger than ever, would they become the next victims of Seabrook's sinister secrets? The next morning, the storm had left Seabrook bruised. Debris littered the once pristine beach, twisted pieces of wood mingling with trash. Mark felt the remnants of the night before hung around him like fog on the shoreline, heavy and suffocating. He couldn't shake the feeling in his gut. The ocean had whispered something unsettling, something he was too afraid to fully comprehend. "Are you okay, Dad?" Jake's small voice broke through Mark's thoughts as he stood staring at the turbulent waves crashing onto the shore. His son's innocence only highlighted Mark's own dread. "Yeah, buddy. Just thinking, he mumbled, forcing a smile. He wanted to protect Jake from the darkness that engulfed their town. But how could he shelter him from a truth that seemed to writhe beneath the waves? Lisa bustled in just then, the diary clutched tightly in her hands. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, her face pale but resolute. The words poured out frantic. "I found something in this diary about a ritual. They sacrifice people, Mark, to the ocean. To keep the town safe." Mark's heart raced. "What are you saying?" She looked him straight in the eyes, her own wide with fear. "I think they're still doing it. The fisherman who disappeared, it was an offering. It's happening again." Jake tugged at his mother's sleeve, confusion etched on his small face. "Mom, is it time for breakfast?" Lisa knelt next to their son, battling tears. "Sweetheart, we might not eat for a while. We need to understand what is going on first." Mark felt the weight of the sea pressing down on them. "Maybe we can find out what happened to the fishermen, see if anyone knows what has been going on." They made their way through the town, the air thick with an uneasy silence. Shops remained closed, shutters bolted as if sealing in the horror. Eyes watched them from behind drawn curtains, but no one dared speak. The streets felt alive with tension, weighed down by secrets burning on the tip of every tongue. Suddenly, they were drawn to the old pier, a place the locals had long abandoned. The rickety boards creaked ominously under their feet, a reminder of times when fishermen thrived here. Mark paused, peering into the murky depths. The shadowy shapes he had dismissed before now teased at the edge of his vision. Was it his imagination, or was something there, waiting? "Jake, stay close," he muttered, feeling the cold sweat begin to bead on his brow. The pier stretched over water darker than night, and the whispers from last night returned, clawing at his sanity. As they approached an old shack on the end of the pier, an unsettling sensation rippled through the air. The door hung ajar, its hinges barely intact, creaking from the wind. Dark stains marred the floor, an unmistakable red, and Mark recoiled as realization hit him. "What is this place?" Jake asked, his small hand clutching his mother's tightly. "We should leave," Lisa said quietly, her voice tremulous. Mark felt a pull, an insatiable urge to go further inside. "No. We need to know the truth." The air grew colder as they stepped inside. A faint glow emanated from the shadows, illuminating a table strewn with old fishing tools and something else. A shrine? Candles flickered, casting eerie silhouettes on the walls. It was a nauseating blend of reverence and horror, and then, a sound shattered the silence. A low, haunting hum drifted from the corners, a melody that felt wrong, dissonant. The room turned charged, electric. They turned, eyes wide with terror. The whispers rose, more urgent, more demanding. The ocean was waiting, hungry. Something was waking in that moment, Mark understood. They weren't just uncovering a secret. They were becoming part of it. They needed to escape. But as Mark reached for Jake's hand, he felt the ground shift beneath him, a sudden tremor vibrating up through the floorboards. "Run!" he yelled, but it was too late. The door slammed shut, sealing them inside. The hum rose to a deafening pitch, a chant pulled in the darkness, and as the shadows lurked closer, Mark realized this was only the beginning. What would the ocean demand from them? What horrors awaited them in the depths that night? The hum morphed into a guttural growl, reverberating through the walls, shaking the very foundation of the shack. Mark's heart raced, pounding against his ribcage, each beat a warning scream. Swallowing hard, he turned to his family. Lisa's eyes were wide, her breath shallow. Jake tugged at her sleeve, panic written all over his small face. "Mom! What is happening?" he cried, his voice cracking under the weight of fear. "Hold on tight," Lisa whispered, desperation in her tone as she pulled Jake close. Mark felt a surge of protective instinct. They had to get out of here, but the darkness pressed in, heavier than the storm clouds that had just passed. Suddenly, the glow from the candles dimmed. Flickering flames cast haunting shadows that danced around the room, distorting the faces of the ancient fishermen carved into the walls. Mark could swear they were grinning, twisted expressions of joy mixed with anger. A trickle of sweat slid down his back as he clutched the door handle locked tight. Scrambling for answers, he scanned the room. His eyes fell upon a small, tattered note stuck to the altar. Fear gripped him as he approached it, feeling the pull of the shadows behind him. The air thickened, as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled apart. "Mark! Look!" Lisa shouted. Her voice sliced through the noise, yanking him back to her. She pointed to the floor where dark stains pooled, whispering of past horrors. Images of sacrifices flared in his mind, each one more graphic than the last. The ocean had claimed them, perhaps to keep its secrets hidden, to prevent the true nature of the town from surfacing. Mark turned back to the note. He reached for it, trembling fingers brushing the edge, and the moment he did, everything went dark. The candles flickered violently as the low hum surged again, almost like a growl of an animal disturbed from slumber. "Is this alive?" he thought, the weight of the eerie stillness piercing even deeper than before. Suddenly he felt a cold wind spiraling around him, damp and suffocating. Shadows twisted and writhed against the walls. In the depths of those shadows lurked shapes, swirling almost playfully. Something was watching, something hungry. "Don't move!" Mark warned, instinctively shielding Jake and Lisa. He couldn't let them vanish too, but the shadows didn't listen. They lunged, crashing around them like waves crashing against the cliffs. Mark felt the pull of the ocean swell from beneath him, its icy fingers reaching out, clawing at the edges of his sanity. "Let us break a window! We have to find a way out!" Lisa shouted, panic breaking her voice. "Hold on!" He darted toward a window, just as the door behind him exploded open. A ghastly figure materialized in the doorway. It was a fisherman, eyes clouded and mouth stretched too wide, dripping with seaweed and salt. Mark's blood ran cold. This was no ordinary spirit, this was a warning. "Offer yourself," it whispered, voice like gravel scraping against bone. "Or be consumed." The room twisted again, chaos erupting, shadows lunging at them with terrifying speed. "Run!" Mark screamed. They bolted for the window, but the air thickened, holding them back. The figure took a step inside, crawling closer, drawn by a force Mark couldn't fathom. Mark's chest heaved, the shadows closing in. They were trapped, scared, and the ocean was demanding its due. "Don't look back. Just run!" he yelled, forcing himself to the front. The shadows surged, and he felt a tug on his heart, something far more sinister than just fear. The tug became a pull, dragging him toward the figure, toward that dark abyss lurking beyond. What would it take to break free from this nightmare? As the darkness closed in, threatening to swallow them whole, Mark could only wonder, was escape even possible? The last flicker of candlelight flickered out. They were left standing in pitch black, the sound of rushing water filling their ears, promising the horrors awaiting them. But all they had was each other, and a choice that loomed ominously on the horizon. Would they offer themselves to the ocean, or fight against the tide? The darkness felt alive, thick and suffocating. Mark's instincts screamed at him to move, but his body felt rooted to the spot. His hands trembled as he held on to Lisa and Jake, the weight of their fear pressing heavier against his chest. "Where do we go?" Lisa whispered, her voice barely a breath, quiet against the crashing tide of shadowy whispers. Mark strained his eyes, searching for anything that could guide them. The cold wind did not relent. It twisted and thieved around them, pulling with a physical force that gnawed at his sanity. The fisherman figure was still inside the shack, its eyes glinting like salt-encrusted stones amidst the murky shadows. The walls of the shack felt alive, pulsating, as if the very structure was a part of this dark hunger. Mark's pulse quickened with each beat, the urgency rising. They couldn't just stand there. "Follow me," he shouted. His voice cracked, but it seemed to pierce the darkness momentarily, rallying the fear inside him into resolve. He began to dart toward the far corner of the room, reminded of the window in his mind, a potential escape route that glimmered like a distant hope. Jake pulled back slightly, clinging to his mother, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Dad, I'm scared." "I know, buddy. But we have to move," Mark shouted, forcing himself to sound braver than he felt. He gripped Jake's arm tightly, ready to shove him forward if it meant saving them. As he ran, shadows lunged at them, sharp and darting. They became claws that swiped at the edges of his vision, scraping against his skin. An icy chill snaked its way up his spine. Something was willing to drag them down, down, down into the depths where light couldn't shine. The figure moved with unnatural speed, slipping through the dark, its mouth widening into an impossible grin. "Offer yourself," it crooned, each word dripping like oil. "Join us beneath the waves." The words stabbed Mark, but he forced them out of his mind. He pushed the fear into a corner, screaming at himself to focus. The window! It had to be close. Just beyond the dim shadows. With every step, the gnarled fingers of the dark world seemed to snatch at his clothes, pulling him back. He gritted his teeth, fighting against their magnetic pull. "There!" Mark shouted, pointing toward the window that now stood before them, a sliver of moonlight breaking through the jagged glass. "We'll break it!" Lisa moved first, her determination igniting a flicker of hope. But just as they reached it, the figure lunged again, blocking their escape. "Offer yourself," it extended a hand, grasping for them. Mark's fingers clenched into fists. "No! Run! Now!" In a wild burst of strength, he shoved Lisa and Jake forward, crashing against the window with sheer desperation. Glass shattered, sending shards flying. The world outside glimmered as Mark felt an unnatural force collide into him, the darkness screaming its protest. Light flooded in, sharp and white, but it was blinding. He grabbed Jake, who was on the edge of confusion. Lisa was 2 steps ahead, propelled by a survival instinct that surged like a wave beneath their feet. Just as Mark pulled them through the jagged hole, a deep roar echoed through the night, hollow and reverberating, washing over them like a tsunami of dread. "Keep moving! Go, go, go!" he shouted, adrenaline surging as he felt the ground fall away beneath them. They tumbled forward, sprawling onto the wet sand outside. The ocean glittered ominously under the moonlight, beckoning, shifting, ready. They were free, but, as Mark glanced back at the shack, dread coiled in his gut. And then he understood. Why was it so desperate? He whispered, the realization gnawing at him. "What does it want from us?" Lisa's eyes clouded with uncertainty. "What do we do now?" But as he looked toward the vast black sea, the horizon loomed ominously, the waves cocked back like a fist ready to strike. Was it chasing them? Before he could breathe, shadows gathered at the window's edge, and a voice swept through the air, cold and ethereal. "You cannot escape, the ocean will have its due." Mark felt the panic simmering to a boil, the world tilting as he faced the choice they thought they had escaped. Were they truly free, or had they just traded one nightmare for another? As the tide surged ominously, life would unveil its true price, and this was only the beginning. The water surged, dark and churning, reflecting the silver of the moonlight in a way that felt menacing. Mark struggled to catch his breath as he pulled Lisa and Jake to their feet. "We need to get away from the beach," he exclaimed, glancing back towards the dilapidated shack. The figure still lingered there, an ominous silhouette against the jagged window frame. "Where can we go?" Lisa replied, her voice rising with panic. The night felt too vast, the shadows too deep. The idea of running into the forest seemed just as perilous as staying near the water. In that moment, more than fear, the sinking weight of dread anchored itself within Mark's chest. The whispers were no longer coming just from the shack, they echoed around them, rapping into a disjointed symphony of despair, begging for their attention. "They're all around us!" Jake cried, burying his face against Lisa. "Focus! We can't let it inside our heads!" Mark barked, steering them south along the shoreline where he could just make out the dark outline of the trees hugging the edge of the forest. "Just keep moving!" As they sprinted, the damp sand gave way to hard ground, the sound of their footsteps barely piercing the eerie murmurs that danced above the crashing waves. Shadows flicked past them, vibrating with life, just out of the corner of their vision. "Dad, what if it comes after us?" Jake's voice trembled, terror lifting his tiny body with every rapid breath. Mark's heart hammered in sync with his son's fear. He had to sound convincing. "It can't follow us into the woods. We'll be safe there." But doubts festered. They were free from the shack, yet every inch they moved felt haunted. The forest loomed like a sentient beast, feeding on the darkness from the ocean. "Tighten up!" Mark barked, pulling the two closer, scanning the tree-line as they rushed under the canopy of twisted branches. The air shifted to something colder as they penetrated deeper into the trees. There was an unsettling stillness here, the normal sounds of the night muted. His pulse quickened. "I don't like this." Suddenly, Jake screamed. "Look!" He pointed, his hand shaking. At first, Mark didn't see anything but the swaying branches above. Then, a pair of glowing yellow eyes pierced the darkness, watching them. As they closed in, the creature stepped out, a twisted form of shadow and rotten flesh, resembling something human yet so grotesquely wrong. "Run!" Mark urged, dragging them away as panic coursed through him. The creature seemed to melt back into the darkness, the air thickening with a sense of impending doom. Branches whipped against their arms and faces as they stumbled deeper into the forest, the shadows shifting uncomfortably close. Desperation clawed at Mark. This wasn't just a nightmare, it was turning into a hunt. With every step he felt as if something chased them just beyond their sight. "Where do we go?" Lisa panted, darting glances behind. "Keep going, just keep going," Mark shouted, but his words felt hollow, their significance lost to the suffocating darkness around them. Bug-eyed remnants of long-ago campfires littered the thin trail they stumbled upon. Old, charred logs curled and twisted beneath them. Mark turned to look behind just as a low, guttural growl shattered the silence. It was close, too close. They dashed past trees that bent in strange angles, hiding secrets of their own. But as they rounded a corner, a place came into view, an old Ranger-esque tower, decaying, but its height offered a glimpse of safety. "There!" Mark yelled, urgency flooding his veins. Reaching the base, they leaped up the rickety ladder as the air above grew thick with growls and howls that churned through the trees, swirling like an angry storm. Just when they thought they might be safe, there was a thunderous crash below them. The creature was here. It roared, ripping through the underbrush, a sound that sent chills racing down Mark's spine. Standing on that shaky platform, he felt the wind shift. A whisper turned to a howl. "You cannot escape the ocean's embrace." The ground trembled, and Mark gripped the railing, eyes wide. What had they really unleashed? As shadows swirled below, Mark's mind raced with uncertainty. Was there still something they could do to fight back? Or were they merely spiraling toward an unspeakable fate? Tension hung like a thick fog as they heard it again. The ocean will have its due. But what would it truly take to free them from its grasp? The wind howled around the old Ranger's tower, a predatory sound that merged with the growls echoing in the forest below. Mark pressed his back against the splintered wall, the wood creaking against his weight. The height gave him a false sense of security. He knew all too well what lurked beneath them, just waiting to pounce. "Do you think it's gone?" Lisa whispered, her eyes wide, glistening with fear. "I don't know," Mark replied, breathing heavily as he glanced over the edge. The ground was a dark, chaotic mass now. The shadows danced and writhed, as if alive. "But we can't stay here for long." Jake, trembling, clung to Lisa's side. His face was pale, reflecting the looming dread that enveloped them. What if it gets in? What if it finds us?" "Don't say that," Mark snapped, surprising even himself with the edge in his voice. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the torrent within. "We just need to think." Suddenly, the creature's guttural growl resonated through the air, sending a tremor through the wooden structure. Mark lost his grip on the railing. "It's here!" The sound was closer now, monstrous and feral. Its breath scraped against the tower, a foul stench wafting up like noxious gas. Mark's heart raced uncontrollably, fear coursing through him like ice. "Keep quiet." He lowered his voice, frantically scanning for an escape route. Part of him screamed to jump, to run, but with nowhere else to go, they were trapped. One of the slats along the floor creaked loudly beneath him, and Mark steadied himself. He couldn't risk making any noise. He peered up, searching for other exits. Above them, the platform extended further, but the ascent looked perilous with nothing intact other than rotting wood. Mark! The eyes! Jake squeaked, terror entwining his small voice. Mark stiffened. At the base of the tower, shimmering yellow orbs pierced the darkness, fixated on them as if he had just stepped into a nightmare from which there was no wake-up call. And no, Mark whispered, his mouth dry as sandpaper. The creature's body moved, a shadow coiling beneath the flickering moonlight, and he felt its gaze searching. We need to make a plan. Lisa's voice quavered. She squeezed Jake's hand tighter. We can't just wait here. We have to distract it. Mark stammered, his mind racing. We need to create a way out. Something to lure it away. But it might hurt you. Jake protested, his small frame shaking. Hey! Mark crouched, bringing his eyes level with Jake's. We'll get through this together. I promise. But even as he said it, doubt clawed at his insides. Would his promise hold against such darkness? He glanced around, spotting fragments of old camping gear strewn across the platform. A fire starter lay haphazardly nearby, glinting in the moonlight. I can make a diversion. What if it attracts more? Lisa's voice was filled with dread. Mark inhaled shakily. Then we run with everything we have. He gathered the gear, the fire starter, and peered over once more. The creature was restless below, its growls deepening. Jake, I need you to stay with Mom no matter what happens, do not leave her. Dad! Jake whimpered. Now! Mark snapped. Panic flared, and he felt the urgency clawing at him like a wild beast. He ignited the spark, a tiny flame building as shadows flickered across the floor. As the fire came alive, he tossed it toward the edge of the tower. A burst of flames lit up the night, sending a wail ripping from the creature below. Mark could see its twisted form twisting and contorting in anger. Hurry! Run! He launched toward the upper platform, clawing at the splintered wood while the acrid smoke billowed around him. As they scrambled toward the heights, the howls crescendoed, filling the air with a terror that felt alive, a cacophony of sorrow and rage. The structure shuddered violently, and Mark realized they might all collapse into the dark depths below. Mark! Come on! Lisa yelled, pulling Jake with urgency, but they were already losing precious seconds. The flames forced the creature backward, but Mark felt its presence lurking just beyond the firelight, waiting for its next moment to strike. Go, go! He felt the world tilt beneath him. The tower trembled again, creaking ominously. As they neared the top, the creature's shrieks transformed into something darker, something chilling that crawled under their skin. I can't hold on much longer. Mark gasped, the wood splintering around him. His footing faltered, and he turned to see the monster's maw gaping wide, shining with madness. Then he saw a glimmer of light in the distance, a faint hope beyond the terror. But as they reached for it, something else flickered, a shadow deeper and far more menacing than anything they had faced. What would they find when they stepped into that light? Would it lead them to salvation or trap them further into the creature's grasp? Keep climbing! Mark yelled, though a knot of fear twisted inside him. The real nightmare was just beginning. The moment they reached the platform's edge, Mark's heart sank. The thing that loomed above was now a slithering shadow, an embodiment of all the nightmares he'd ever felt. Its eyes glinted with malice, an unearthly brightness cutting through the smoke that swallowed the tower. Mark! Lisa cried, her voice strangled with panic. What do we do? There's nowhere to go. They stood at the precipice, exposed beneath the vast darkness, with the beast inching closer. Mark frantically scanned the horizon. The faint glimmer he had seen flickered like a dying star, haunting and yet somehow tantalizingly close. Maybe, just beyond that ghastly maw, lay a way to escape. Climb! Mark barked. We can reach that light. But everything felt uncertain. The air thrummed with tension, and the ground beneath them felt alive, quaking in anticipation of blood. Jake's cry pierced through the haze, Mom, I'm scared. Mark turned to find his son's wide, trembling eyes, filled with unadulterated terror. He swallowed hard, trying to quell the trembling in his own chest. "Stay with Mom, Jake. Do not move from her side. Mark, it's too risky," Lisa shouted, her resolve wavering. He could see the creature's rage boiling beneath the surface, a silent promise to consume them slowly, to toy with their fears. "We have to give it something else to focus on," Mark shouted, already formulating a desperate plan. "Mark, don't," Lisa pleaded, but he was already moving, running toward the far edge of the platform, the fire flickering out around him. The smoke was thick now, stinging his eyes, suffocating him. As he reached for the remnants of a broken branch, the creature slashed the air with its claws, the sound like thunder. Mark flinched, swinging the branch toward the monster. "Get back!" He brandished it, his voice raw and filled with determination, even as he felt the skin crawl on his back. The creature recoiled, its eyes narrowing. With one deep, guttural growl, it lunged forward, but this time, Mark was ready. He thrust the branch, aiming for the monster's massive jaw, only to feel the wood splinter and crack against its teeth. "Distract it!" he yelled, hoping with every ounce of his being that it would buy them a few more seconds. "Now, Lisa!" Lisa grabbed another makeshift weapon, a broken piece of metal, hurling it into the dark abyss below. The metallic clang echoed, and for a moment, the creature paused, its attention flickering away from Mark. "Go!" he shouted again. "Now! Climb!" With no further hesitation, they scrambled upward, adrenaline fueling their desperate ascent. The platform shook beneath them, wood splintering and breaking. The pain of his heart thumped painfully in rhythm with the tremors, and Mark felt terror gnawing away at the edges of his courage. What was waiting for them above? Would the flicker of light be salvation or another trap? Moments passed like seconds, time stretching thin as they climbed. The creature's furious growls echoed behind them, pulsing with rage. A flash of teeth caught in the dim moonlight made Mark realize how fast it had closed the gap. "Faster!" Lisa urged, her voice barely above a whisper, fear threading through her tone. Finally, they reached the top. Breathless, they found themselves on a precarious, narrow ledge overlooking an expanse of swirling mist. The light pulsing in the distance was clear now, beckoning them like a moth to a flame. But the smoldering darkness beneath them shifted, a reminder of the monster still hunting. "Do you see it?" Mark asked, panting heavily. "It's south so close," Lisa breathed, the flicker of hope illuminating her terrified features. "Jake, stay close," Mark urged, gripping his son's small hand tightly. "Whatever happens, don't let go." As they took a tentative step toward the light, the entire structure trembled violently, wood splintering, threatening to throw them into the abyss. The beast was no longer a distant thing. It was upon them, the dark shadow stretched against the looming light. "Mark!" The scream shook his very soul. He turned just in time to see a terrifying claw swipe through the air. "Run!" And at that moment, they lunged toward the glowing figure in the distance. But just before they reached it, a deafening roar shook the night, enveloping their world in darkness. What lay ahead in that overwhelming light? Would they embrace the hope of escape or plunge deeper into horror? The darkness closed in on them, thick and suffocating, as they stumbled forward, feeling the ground beneath their feet shift unpredictably. Mark's breath came in harsh gasps, his heart racing as the echo of the creature's roar reverberated in his skull. What had they run into? Was this dreaded place a bottomless pit, a void of despair waiting to swallow them whole? "Look!" Lisa shouted, pointing into the swirling mist ahead. The glow flickered again, more consistent this time, almost tangible enough to reach out and touch. "That's our chance," Mark urged, feeling a flicker of hope ignite amid the terror. He tightened his grip on Jake's hand, but the near silence around them was broken by the beast's growling, closer now, vibrating through the very stones beneath their feet. "Mark!" Jake's voice broke, high-pitched and terrified, pulling at his father's resolve. "I know, buddy. Just hold on. Don't look back." They crossed the ledge, careful and fast, every step reverberating their desperation. As they neared the light, the air grew warmer, a stark contrast to the icy grip of the ominous shadows. Mark felt the pulse of something alive in the phosphorescent glow, something pulsating that seemed to offer comfort and danger in equal measure. "Mark, please, it's right there." Lisa's voice was hoarse, fighting against the oppressive atmosphere. "Just a little more." The light intensified, wrapping around them like the gently glowing arms of a ghost urging them forward into its embrace or its trap. Suddenly, a resonant thud echoed behind them. The ground quaked, making them stagger. Mark glanced back, heart dropping. The creature pressed against the edge, its eyes blazing with fury. One massive claw swiped through the mist, just missing Jake by inches. Terrified, Mark clutched his son closer, moving faster now, fueled by sheer instinct. "Keep moving! Push through!" Mark yelled, propelling himself and his family toward that beacon of light, their last hope resting on the flickering intensity. But as they veered toward the glow, a sharp pain shot up Mark's knee. He stumbled, falling to the splintered wood, groaning as he felt the edges bite into his skin. "Dad!" Jake shrieked. Mark glanced back, his eyes wide, still fixed on the approaching doom. He could see it clearly now, massive, sinewy tendrils stretching out from the darkness, writhing and clawing, hungry for them. "Help me!" Mark gasped, desperately trying to rise, but the weight of terror pressed down on him like gravity. "Don't let go!" Lisa cried, her voice carrying the urgency of survival. She pulled him, her eyes wild with fear, as she darted towards the light, dragging Mark with her. Just then, a jarring crack echoed through the air, a splintering sound followed by an even more horrendous roar that filled the void. The platform beneath their feet shuddered, timber ripping apart as the looming creature roared in triumph, feeling their anguish. "Run!" Mark screamed. He fought against the crashing fear in his heart, gritting his teeth as he struggled to regain his footing. As they finally burst onto the edge of the light, it wrapped around them like an unforgiving blanket, illuminating the shadows that had haunted them. Mark blinked, the brightness momentarily blinding him. What lay ahead was not just light, it was a vast expanse, an ocean of swirling luminescence that seemed alive in ways he couldn't comprehend. He felt reverberations in his chest, as if the very essence of this place resonated with his fear and longing. "What is this?" Lisa's voice trembled, staring into the radiant depths, where figures danced and flickered in and out of existence. Before they could process what lay before them, a thunderous crash snapped their attention back. The creature had lunged again, its writhing tendrils swirling with malevolence, hungry eyes locked on their escape. "Move now!" Mark shouted, feeling the pull of the abyss behind them. But as they moved into the light, a chilling realization dawned on him. The light beckoned them as much as the darkness did. What was this shimmering expanse? Was it a refuge? Or another trap waiting for them? And behind them, how long could they outrun the terror pursuing them? The ground started to rumble violently again. Time was running out. "Don't stop!" Mark yelled, desperation lining every word. The path ahead shimmered, but would it lead them to salvation or to something far worse? With each frantic step they took, the pulsating light grew brighter, drawing them deeper into its heart. It felt warm against their skin, igniting a flicker of hope that warred with the abject fear rooting them to the spot. Lisa's eyes darted around, catching glimpses of ethereal shapes that writhed just beyond the edges of the glow. "Is it safe?" she whispered, her voice trembling as she clutched Jake's hand. Mark hesitated. He could feel the dark wash of their pursuer crawling at his back, its breath a rancid wind threatening to engulf them. "I don't know," he finally said, terror pooling in his belly as he pulled Jake closer. "But we can't go back." The moment stretched, fraught with uncertainty. The walls of light pulsed, shadows danced just beyond comprehension. It was as if the light itself was alive, and he could feel it breathing with a heavy, ancient rhythm that echoed the deep-seated fear in his heart. Suddenly, the light flickered violently. A deafening roar sliced through the air, a vicious growl that sent chills racing down Mark's spine. It was close, much closer than it had ever been. "Move!" he bellowed, forcing his legs to push forward. They ran, the sound of their pounding hearts mingling with the chaos of the growling creature. As they sprinted deeper into the radiant expanse, Mark noticed the shadows gathering at the periphery of the light. Those figures, once flickering and benign, now appeared more defined, looming closer, twisted, tormenting forms that clawed at the edges of his sanity. "Dad, look!" Jake cried, pointing frantically ahead. A silhouette mingled with the glowing sea, a figure that seemed to beckon with open arms. "Is someone there?" Lisa shouted, desperation lacing her voice. But as they drew near, the figure morphed, skin stretching taut over jagged bones, a face contorted in agony. Mark's breath snagged in his throat. He stumbled back, pulling Lisa and Jake. "It's not real! Keep moving!" Just then, the growling escalated, a low rumbling that echoed with primal fury. Mark dared a glance over his shoulder. The creature had broken through the light's barrier, tendrils slithering towards him like vipers, thrumming with a life of their own. The claws dug through the shifting shadows, grasping hungrily at the space they had just vacated. "Faster! Run!" he urged, adrenaline coursing through his veins. They sprinted toward the now forming path ahead, the flickering light narrowing as they pressed deeper into the swirling chaos. But the pulsating glow began to lose intensity. Shadows clawed at its edges, hungry and insatiable. "Where is it taking us?" Lisa shouted, panic lacing her words. Mark had no answer. Shadows loomed closer, blocking their way. They could hear whispers, soft and sinister, threading through the air like poisoned honey. "You can't escape, you're part of us now." Then came the crack, that chilling snap, like bones breaking. At that instant, the ground beneath them jolted violently. Mark fell again, pain exploding in his knee, but he pushed through, grabbing Jake, who had fallen beside him. "Get up! We can't stop!" All around them, the figures convulsed, their whispers rising to a crescendo that made his ears ring. "Keep your eyes on me!" Mark yelled, locking eyes with his family. The terror tightened like a vice around his ribs, the weight of despair settling heavily on his shoulders. They were running out of time. As they crawled through the narrowing path of light, tendrils reached out, grazing Mark's neck, sending icy fingers of dread racing down his spine. "Help!" a distant voice cried, resonating so close yet painfully out of reach. The tendrils whipped back with sudden force, pulling Mark's hand away from Jake. "No!" he screamed, desperation clawing at his throat. But the shadows surged, dragging him back like an undertow. "Dad!" Jake's voice broke, a struck chord of fear. The paths of light flickered one last time, revealing a dark, yawning void, an opening that shimmered like glass. Mark felt the light reel back as the monster's growl trembled through the very marrow of his bones. Would he let the darkness take him? "No!" he gasped, a surge of defiance rising inside. He lunged forward, back toward Jake, instinctively pulling him closer. But what lay ahead was an excruciating choice. What if the light turned out to be more lethal than the terror behind? The path quaked beneath them, and as the shadows encroached, a chilling thought snaked its way into Mark's mind. Would escaping today mean embracing another nightmare tomorrow? "Dad!" Jake's voice trailed off in a strangled whisper. The light flickered one last chance. But what would they sacrifice? The abyss below them opened wider. And Mark realized they had only seconds to decide, to find out if hope was strong enough to overshadow the darkness. The pulsing glow around them dimmed, leaving a thin line between life and an insatiable void. Mark's heart thundered in his chest as if it knew the stakes he had to choose. "Dad, please!" Jake pleaded, his eyes wide and filled with unspoken dread. Lisa clung to Jake, terror etched in her face as the shadows swirled around them, whispers clawing at their sanity. A soul-piercing roar reverberated through the air, shaking the very fabric of their reality. Mark inhaled sharply, grasping for the hope that felt just out of reach. "We go toward the light." But deep inside, doubt nagged. What if the light was a trick, drawing them in only to trap them again? "This is it," he thought, shaking his head as he pushed his fears down. They couldn't turn back now. "Run!" Mark yelled, his voice cracking under the pressure. Together, they surged forward, leaving behind the tendrils that sought to snatch them back into darkness. A sharp pain flared in Mark's leg, but he didn't falter. Every inch closer to that flicker of hope was worth the risk, no matter how fragile it felt. The shadows grew more agitated, swirling violently as they chased. The whispers crescendoed, turning into haunting cries that echoed in their ears. "You cannot escape, you are ours," they echoed, a cacophony of despair and desperation. "Keep moving!" Lisa shouted, her voice mighty despite her fear. United, they pushed through the tightening space, edging closer to the ethereal glow. "Almost there," Mark encouraged, every stride fueled by a fierce love and the desire to protect his family. The brightness pulsed with warmth now, promising something they desperately wanted, freedom. But just as they felt the tender caress of light wrapping around them, an overwhelming force slammed into Mark's back. He stumbled forward, his grip slipping on Jake's hand. "No!" he yelled, spinning around to catch hold of his son. Instinct kicked in, and with sheer strength, Mark lunged toward Jake, clutching him tighter. Lisa's frantic breaths filled the air as she pulled them closer together, a portal of warmth amid growing shadows. "Dad!" Jake cried, voice trembling. "I'm scared." "I know, buddy. Just hold on." Mark's heart raced as he felt the thrum of fear at the edges of his mind. They had come too far to let go now. With one last surge of desperation, he led them into the light. Their bodies blazed with a radiant surge as the darkness behind them imploded into a howling abyss. The shouts of the shadow creature faded, screams of anger and abandonment intertwining with the soft embrace of light. Then they burst through. All at once the shadows receded into nothingness, swept away into the distant horizon. They stood now, breathless under the brilliance of an endless, shimmering sky. "Is it over?" Jake whispered, looking up with wide eyes, filled with wonder and disbelief. Mark locked eyes with Lisa, tears glistening like stars in her eyes. This moment together, alive, was everything. "I think we're safe," he murmured, hope swelling within him. But as they stood in the quiet, a distant sound rippled through the air. The ocean, vast and deep, whispered once more, its voice softer now but potent, reminding them of the ties it held. "Dad, do you think it will leave us alone?" Jake asked, clutching Mark's hand tightly. Mark knelt before him, a firm yet gentle grip reassuring Jake. "We can't forget, buddy. We have to remember, and if we ever have to face it again, we stick together. Always." The trio embraced tightly, embracing the warmth of life and the scars from the past. The ocean rolled in the distance, but here, under the glow of emerged dawn, Mark felt the weight of their fight turn into a promise. A new start, a new chance to live without the ghosts of Seabrook haunting them. Now's your moment to act. You need to subscribe immediately to catch exclusive stories like this. Smash that like button now to show your support. Every click makes a difference. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories. I want to hear what you think about their journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with your friends who need closure too. Join the community and let us keep the adventure alive together.